Chapter 7. The Situation. Elliot was greeted with the dungeon prompt flashing into existence before his eyes. Loot gained, 2012 EXP, 695 gold. He glanced over the statistic information presented by the prompt and frowned. They'd all been punished by the long time it had taken them to complete the dungeon. 194 minutes total, with almost all of that going towards building the platform. The time taken had resulted in an F rating, and because the dungeons worked by taking the lowest rating across the board and using it as a multiplier, well, there was no multiplier this time. What a waste, Elliot murmured. The difficulty rating of the dungeon had been a B, which was interesting and daunting when he considered what they might mean for the higher ratings. Worse than that, it made him wonder just how lucky they had been to have the right people on hand to create the platform in the first place. If Stephen hadn't been there, they wouldn't have access to wooden panels. If Jane were missing, they wouldn't have had the wire. If Marcus weren't there, they would have all been swimming because without the ability to lock the elevation of something, they would have been completely screwed. That was before they even got into dealing with the bone whales, the bird people, and the Icebringers with the exact combat team they'd had. If even one of those people hadn't been there, Elliot shook his head before finally turning his attention to the room. There was nobody else in the room with him. Not a single person. He was completely on his own. That was greater evidence towards his theory that there were multiple Tory in this place. Unfortunately, it also meant that he would need to find Anna to return her sword and Sirit to compensate her for the scrolls his plan had required. Sirit had clearly known this was going to happen, given her choice of words in the dungeon. Either way, it was a problem for later. Right now, he had one more dungeon to complete, and then he could finally stop. Elliot stepped out of the exit before turning and re-entering the dungeon for the final time. So much had happened today that he was having trouble keeping it all straight in his head. Everything just seemed to blur together. Elliot had definitely underestimated the mental toll this was going to take on him. He would have to rework his plan. 4 dungeons a day were completely unrealistic if this was the level of opposition he was going to be facing. On the other hand, 3 dungeons per day were far more realistic, or perhaps even 2 if one of them was particularly taxing. That seemed like something he could maintain for much longer than 4. The Grey Room was occupied when he arrived, although there were far fewer people than before. There was also nobody from the last dungeon, at least none he could recognize anyway. He spent a few moments doing a head count and placed the room's population at somewhere under 30 people. He began tallying up the estimated levels. There were 3 people with glowing weapons, which probably put them somewhere over level 200. There was a group of people, 7 strong, without any armor at all, and they were looking at him worriedly. It completely derailed his attempt at tallying the levels. He watched them, watching him for a long, awkward moment. Was this how Annette had felt back when he studied her in that first dungeon? "Excuse me," a woman called out to him. "Can I ask you some questions?" Elliot turned towards them but didn't make a move to cross the distance, remembering how he had felt when Annette had approached him so suddenly, and the flash of panic that had cut through him. It wasn't something he would want to inflict on somebody else. "Yes," Elliot said, as calm as he could. "Ask away." "Thank you," the woman said. "My name is Mary, by the way." "Elliot," Elliot answered. "What is this place?" Mary asked. "What is that timer on the wall for? Why do we all have weapons? Why do you have armor?" Elliot listened to the question carefully and nodded. "This place is called the Grey Room. You come here when you die in the real world.